Promoting dialogue.
Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal, and around the world we are live on wadr.org. Welcome to Newslink. Here are the top stories. Senegalese Prime Minister Sonko engages National Assembly over the state of the nation today.
Ils essaient de trouver une fausse solution à un vrai problème. Génn bi à tout prix.
They are trying to find a false solution to a real problem. Illegal immigration is not a solution, and no one can justify this desire to leave the country at all costs.
In Nigeria, women rally in Rivers State to demand reinstatement of suspended officials amid state of emergency. Guinean government to combine presidential and legislative election amid calls for inclusive dialogue from opposition. And Benin's President Talon hosts religious leaders on peace, unity and 2026 election.
We also discussed the issue of jihadism in Benin. Our only weapons are prayer and nature. We must support the Beninese government in addressing this challenge, and we are committed to doing our part.
Details of these stories and more coming up shortly.
Christopher Aticho with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast and a warm welcome to our listeners in the Gambia, Ghana and Liberia. Newslink begins in Senegal, where Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko is currently in the National Assembly answering questions from members of parliament. Ousmane Sonko is being questioned on several hot topics of the day, including layoffs in public services, the economy, justice, youth employment and illegal migration. On issues of illegal migration, the Prime Minister talked about the situation of Senegalese citizens persecuted in Mauritania and more recently in Brazil, which resulted in death of a Senegalese citizen. Ousmane Sonko condemns the incident, but he also calls on the compatriots to respect the rules and laws established in foreign countries. Take a listen.
Ils essaient de trouver une fausse solution à un vrai problème. Génn bi à tout prix.
They are trying to find a false solution to a real problem. Illegal immigration is not a solution, and no one can justify this desire to leave the country at all costs. We have studied the problem in depth and realized that unlike in other countries, there is no increased famine or civil war that can prevent young people from taking the path of emigration. We can agree that the economic management of recent decades has weighed down the country, but we are in an era of change. You young people must understand this. We have your strength to build this country and restore it. A battery of solutions have been adopted, and we will begin implementing some of them. For example, security measures have been strengthened. This is why few departures have been noted at the moment. Several initiatives are also being considered to occupy young people. We will return to this in details throughout the session. To our compatriots currently in other sister countries, we also call on you to respect established laws and regulations. You cannot immigrate to a country and adopt its own regulation. It can't work like that. We urge you to be vigilant and respect the rules to avoid incidents that can sometimes be diplomatic.
Senegalese Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko. In Guinea, in a move aimed at speeding up the return to constitutional order, the government has announced plans to hold presidential and legislative elections simultaneously. However, the situation has been met with strong opposition from the coalition of opposition groups known as the Forces Verbs du Guinea. The opposition is demanding the establishment of an inclusive dialogue framework to define an electoral timetable and to appoint an independent body to oversee the organization of future elections. Francis Boniface has more in this report.
During a meeting on Friday with a technical delegation from ECOWAS, Prime Minister Amadou Wuriba announced that the presidential and legislative elections will follow directly after a constitutional referendum scheduled for September. He said the decision is meant to prevent institutional imbalance. The move has been welcomed by Boubacar Sidiki Jallo, president of the Union for Popular Movement, a party that supports the military-led transition. Meanwhile, the Forces Vives de Guinea coalition condemned what they described as a unilateral decision by the government. Opposition leaders argued that the executive branch should not have sole control over the electoral process. An ECOWAS delegation led by its political affairs officer was in Conakry to discuss strategies with the government for mobilizing resources to support Guinea's transition back to constitutional governance.
Francis Boniface filed the report. Still on elections, supporters of the African People's Party Côte d'Ivoire PPACI gathered in a large number in Dabo, in a town about 50 kilometers from Abidjan, to celebrate the third edition of the party's Renaissance Festival. Former President Laurent Gbagbo headlined the event, with major political rally reaffirming his determination to contest the upcoming elections and expressing strong confidence in his party's chances. Gbagbo addressed the reason behind PPACI's decision to suspend its participation in the Independent Electoral Commission (CEI), citing long-standing dysfunctions dating back to 2009. He specifically accused current Prime Minister Robert Bugri Mambe of overseeing the fraudulent registration of 400,000 voters during his time as head of CEI. Although still officially ineligible to run due to a conviction by the Ivorian judiciary, Gbagbo accused his supporters that he would be their candidate in the October presidential election. Beyond national issues, Gbagbo called on African nations to commit to building genuine democracies across the country. In Benin, President Patrice Talon has met with a delegation from the Framework for Dialogue of Religious Denominations as part of ongoing efforts to promote interfaith dialogue and strengthen social cohesion. The meeting, held late last week, also touched on security concerns, including terrorism in northern Benin. Imo Edit reports.
During the meeting, religious leaders raised concerns about the outdated law governing associations in Benin. They argued that the current legislation hampers the effective operation of religious and faith-based organizations. They also addressed issues surrounding secularism and tensions between certain religious groups, urging the government's support in promoting harmony. The 2026 general elections also featured in the discussions, with the religious leaders sharing their perspectives on the national electoral outlook. In his response, President Talon acknowledged the vital role of religious denominations in fostering peace, tolerance, and unity across communities. He expressed his commitment to maintaining close collaboration with religious leaders in addressing both social and community challenges. On the upcoming elections, the president proposed the organization of the following-up meeting and said the outcomes of that engagement could contribute meaningfully to ensuring a successful and peaceful electoral process in 2026. Michelle Alokpo, Secretary General and spokesperson for the Framework for Dialogue of Religious Denominations, shared remarks after the meeting.
What pleased us even more was his announcement that by June, he plans to bring together nuns, evangelical churches, and other religious groups to work towards establishing a law on religious denominations. We also discussed the issue of jihadism in Benin. Our only weapons are prayer and nature. We must support the Beninese government in addressing this challenge, and we are committed to doing our part.
The meeting, according to both parties, reaffirmed the government's commitment to supporting religious initiatives aimed at peace building and community development.
And that's our Cotonou correspondent Aziz Adam Sole's report and voice by Imo Edits.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
In Togo, President Faure Gnassingbé has been officially appointed as the mediator in the ongoing crisis between the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, and Rwanda. The announcement was made public on Saturday, April 12, 2025. The African Union confirmed this appointment in an official statement stating that President Gnassingbé will succeed Angolan President João Lourenço, who had previously led the mediation efforts. This decision has been met with reactions from civil society organizations in Togo. Augustine Colley completes the story.
On the eve of the official announcement, around 15 Togolese civil society organizations issued a statement opposing the appointment. They expressed their disagreement with the decision of the African Union and President João Lourenço, arguing that President Faure Gnassingbé lacks the legitimacy and the values of justice needed to lead a credible mediation. The organizations criticized Gnassingbé's long rule in Togo, claiming that he has maintained the power through unconstitutional means. They called on the African Union to appoint a mediator with a recognized track record of integrity and values essential for the success of the mediation. The ongoing conflict in eastern DRC pits the Congolese army against the M23 rebel group. According to Kinshasa and supported by the United Nations and major world powers, the M23 rebels receive support from neighboring Rwanda, an accusation Rwanda has since denied. In parallel with the mediation efforts by President Nyasimbe, a separate mediation led by Qatar has already facilitated 2 rounds of meetings in Doha between the involved parties.
And that's Lome's correspondent Sylvia Wadrago's report, voiced by Augustine Colley. In Nigeria, in a show of rising discontent and civic engagement, hundreds of women have taken to the streets of Port Harcourt, the capital of Rivers State, to demand the reinstatement of the suspended governor, deputy governor, and the state legislature. This mass mobilization comes in the wake of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's declaration of a state of emergency in the state. Usman Umar reports.
The peaceful protest commenced early Sunday morning as women of diverse backgrounds gathered at the city's major thoroughfares, chanting slogans and holding placards that call for justice and democratic governance. The demonstration highlighted the gravity of the current political climate in Rivers State, which has attracted national attention following the suspension of key government officials amid allegations of corruption and mismanagement. Speaking to newsmen, the protest leader Nancy Nwanko and one of the protesters, Christiana Tamunomweta, emphasized the essence of their protest.
That the federal authorities in Abuja, relying on conjecture and manufactured narratives, would choose to descend with the full weight of force on Rivers State, deploying a sledgehammer to kill a fly, while ignoring the dire security emergencies ravaging other states like Borno, Yobe, Zamfara, Kaduna, Plateau, and Benue.
States to bring back our constitutionally elected governor, our democratically elected governor. The people voted for him. They exercised their God-given franchise. They voted for him. You cannot come and suspend a constitutionally elected governor.
The crowd remained orderly, but their resolve was evident as they called upon President Tinubu to prioritize the will of the people. As the protests unfold, security forces maintained a visible presence, ensuring that the demonstrations remained non-violent. The declaration of state of emergency and appointment of a sole administrator to manage the affairs of the state for an initial period of 6 months has been met with mixed reactions. Political analysts predict that the outcome of these protests could significantly influence the state's political landscape moving forward. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
And to some legal matters, the trial of Michael Sankori, accused of rights violations including torture, and that the regime of former Gambian President Yahya Jammeh wraps up this week in the U.S. The proceedings in a district court in Denver began last Monday, April 7, with a 12-man jury inviting witnesses to the stand. So far, in a historic trial, 9 witnesses have testified against Corey, an alleged former member of the Juggler, a notorious death squad responsible for several deaths, torture, and forced disappearances during Jammeh's era. Initially accused of 6 counts of torture and 1 count of conspiracy to commit torture, Correa now faces 6 charges after his defense counsel argued he was coerced into committing the crimes. If convicted of all remaining 6 count charges, Michael Correa may serve up to 120 years in prison. Yusuf Taylor, the managing director of the investigative platform Axwani, joins us later during the guest interview with more details of this historic trial of a non-US citizens by an American court. Let's head to Liberia, where now to some partnership stories in the sub-region. The government of Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea have secured funding to advance the 3rd phase of the Mano River Union Road Development and Transport Facilitation Program. This ambitious initiative seeks to enhance regional trade, improve connectivity, and foster socio-economic development across the Mano River Union area, which has historically faced challenges due to inadequate infrastructure and post-conflict recovery needs. WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
The overall objective of the program is to boost the post-conflict economic recovery of the MRU area by improving road infrastructure and promoting intra-community trade. To fulfill their commitments, Liberia's government, through the Ministry of Public Works, has signed a supervision consulting contract with Sierra Consulting Limited, which is collaborating with the local firm BK Enterprise Engineering Consultancy and Construction Services. This phase, supported by financing from the African Development Fund, the Islamic Development Bank, and the national governments, will focus on developing and asphalting 114 kilometers of road, 50 kilometers in Liberia, and 64 kilometers in Sierra Leone, constructed to ECOWAS standards. Additionally, feasibility and design studies will be conducted for another 107 kilometers of roads in Guinea and Liberia. A notable feature of the project is the construction of a 276-meter bridge over the Mancona River, which will connect Guinea and Sierra Leone. Valued at US $98.19 million, the program includes investments in socio-economic infrastructure and capacity building initiatives targeting women and youth. For Newslink on WADR, I'm Abraham Parker in Monrovia.
And that's Abraham Parker from Monrovia. You're still listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Senegalese Prime Minister Sonko engages the National Assembly over the state of the nation today. A Nigeria women rally in Rivers State to demand reinstatement of suspended officials amid state of emergency. Guinean government to combine the presidential and legislative election amid calls for inclusive dialogue from opposition. And Benin's President Patrice Talon hosts religious leaders on peace, unity, and 2026 election. Still ahead in the news, we have the press review, guest interview, and sports news.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's join Usma Uma for the press review in Nigeria.
Let's begin with the Vanguard newspaper that is leading with this story. U.S. court order on Tinubu. Nothing new in FBI, DEA records on drug case. This is according to the presidency. With a rider says court didn't indict president. Recall the drug case, alleged drug case that Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, has ongoing in the U.S. Of course, this became a very important talking point during the campaigns leading to the 2023 general elections. A new court order that has been made public has been cited by the opposition political parties, but the presidency here is responding that there is nothing new in FBI, DEA records on drug case. The other raft of other stories here, Palm Sunday, Christian Association of Nigeria condemns Plateau killings, demands justice. PDP governors meet over Fubara as Tompolo assures of his return. Tompolo, of course, is an ex-Niger Delta militant who now owns Tantita Security Services, which provides security for the Nigerian oil pipelines in the Niger Delta region. He is actually a very strong voice, and this is the first time he's actually speaking on the issue regarding the declaration of state of emergency in Rivers. We move quickly to our second paper for the day, the Guardian newspaper, which is leading with this story. Labour laments high cost of living, braces for wage renegotiation. This is on page 6. Labour leaders allege federal government's exploitation, petition International Labour Organization, United Nations, Code of Conduct to check corruption with e-assets declaration system. Lastly, we take a look at Daily Trust newspaper. Why U.S. court ordered release of Tinubu probe report with 2 riders, nothing new to be revealed, presidency is saying again. Ruling amenable to appeal, this is according to lawyers. And, of course, victorious 1980 AFCON squad. Chukwu, Bassey, 7 others gone, 13 remaining. Of course, this is responding to Christian Chukwu's death, a former Super Eagles player who passed away last week. And that's the much we have for you on this segment of Press Review as I hand you back to the studios.
Thank you very much, Usma Uma from Nigeria with the Press Review.
politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
In our guest interview this afternoon, Yusuf Taylor, the managing editor of the investigative platform Ax1, joins us with more insight in the ongoing historic trial of Michael Sankori, who is accused of right violations, including torture under the regime of former Gambian President Yahya Jammeh in the U.S.
The trial has started. What the role will be is they are going to deliver the verdict, whether Michael Sankoria is guilty on all remaining 6 counts. Now, if he is guilty, they will rule and say that he's guilty on each and every single count. They will have to rule a verdict. So, and then for each maximum sentencing for each, if he is found guilty for conspiracy and actual torture, the maximum is 20 years, which would be a total of 120 years. So that's the role that the jury have to play. Just to give you an idea of some of the testimonies, Yahya Dabo, he alleged that this Michael Sankoria tortured him, beat him up, put plastic bag over his head with pipes, sat on him with a block, they cuffed him in the back, and then not only that, tortured him using some sort of plastic bag, which he burnt, and the plastic bag dripping malt fell on his body. Pictures and photographs of these wounds were tendered in evidence in court. We saw the vivid images during the court.
You actually said testimonies have been heard from some of the witnesses. How many were they in number? And if you can tell us more about some of the testimonies that have come in against Korea in this trial.
Yeah, so in the second day, the testimonies started pouring in. First of all, of course, we to set the stage, there was an expert professor, Maggie Dwyer, from the university, who talked about the Gambia history, because these jurors, remember, like I said, they are American citizens and they don't know much about the Gambia. So there was this professor who laid down the history and to give an idea of the security apparatus and also about coups. Then Aliu Job was the first witness to point out Michael Korea. He was working in the Accountant General's office, and he was also caught up into this coup because it was all a crackdown against a failed coup in 2006 March, led by then Nur Cham. So actually, this Aliu Job, he was actually beaten severely because he had some contact with Cham and helped Cham to flee by sending Cham money. So Job was then apprehended, and then the junglers held him after he was put in front of an investigative panel. And this is similar for most of them, all of them that I'm going to name out. Yahya Adabo was the second witness for the day. And then on the third day, you had other witnesses coming in. Most importantly, Shani Bayo came in, and then Special Agent Matthew Gifford, then Demba Dem. What they described that was very similar is that all of them were put in front of a panel.
So Michael Korea, supposing he's found guilty of these crimes, he may serve up to over 100 years in prison. Will he serve this time in America or back in the Gambia?
Well, it seems most likely that he will serve it in America, except something is different considering what we've observed from all the other cases. I'm not saying that things may be different, but, human rights watchdogs will now start also shouting out, he was convicted in America, and then talk about the status of our prisons, whether they are not trying to double punish the man. But in all fairness, of course, not belittling the suffering that some of the witnesses have befallen, but looking at what has happened for the other two cases, those that have been convicted, they have been held in those countries' jurisdiction where they have been found guilty and sentenced. So he may maximum serve 120 years in prison in an American prison. That is a life prison. But there are some victims of Michael Korea, at least 11 of them. which we have already written a publication about, that have died. And unfortunately, if he does get the maximum prison, that would also serve as a form of justice for those people as well. Yes.
Yusuf Taylor is the managing editor of the investigative platform Akswani. And we can join Sankole Janko for details in the world of sports.
Hello there, warm welcome and thank you for joining us. The Confederation of African Football, CAF, has concluded the final draw for the CAF Under-20 Africa Cup of Nations Egypt 2025 on Sunday at the Egyptian Football Association headquarters in Cairo. The tournament, scheduled to run from 27 April to 18 May 2025, will feature 13 nations battling for continental supremacy and 4 qualification spots to the FIFA Under-20 World Cup Chile 2025. The draw revealed exciting group stage fixtures promising a thrilling start to the competition. Host Egypt, 3-time champions, headlined Group A, where they will face Zambia, Sierra Leone, South Africa and Tanzania in what promises to be a closely fought group. In Group B, record 7-time champions Nigeria are drawn alongside former winners Tunisia as well as Kenya and Morocco, setting the stage for some of the tournament's most anticipated matches. Meanwhile, defending champions Senegal begin their title defense in Group C, which also includes the Central African Republic, DR Congo and Ghana, the latter aiming to reclaim the title they won in 2009. The same year, they became the only African team to win the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. The CAF Under-20 AFCON Egypt 2025 will follow a 3-group format. Group A contains 5 teams, while Group B and C feature 4 teams each. The top 2 teams from each pool, along with the 2 best third-placed teams, will progress to the quarterfinals, with the tournament concluding on 18 May 2025. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek, Mam Kodu and Njai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X formerly Twitter, Instagram at WADR News, and on Facebook at WADR English Service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is our health program, World Body. I am Christopher Ticho. Good afternoon and enjoy the rest of our broadcasts.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, Newmi FM 94.0,
Hilltop Radio 104.7 FM,
and Veritas Radio 102.9 in Banjul, the Gambia. We also appreciate our listeners in